I have some advanced formatting features or options that I want to show you that you can apply to your report. In fact, some of them we already covered or went over when we applied formatting to our forms. As you recall, there's a lot of similarities when it comes to designing our forms and reports between the two. You'll also see in just a second with the formatting, there's a lot of similarities there as well. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and right-click in a blank area, go to the Design view, and let's say that I want to go ahead and change the title of the report here. Now the title could have either been created by coming up here and adding a label down below, or coming up here in the header footer group, again on the Design tab and clicking on the title button. Either way, if you just come over here, select it, click in it, see the cursor flashing, go ahead and make your changes, then click off in a blank area. That works. Or if you use the title feature, if you click on it again, it doesn't add a new title box. It just, because you already added it by clicking on it the first time, it'll go ahead and select the text within the title box, and then you can just start typing, make your changes, and then click off when you're done. I'm going to go ahead and right-click and go to the Layout view, and you can see my customer detail report here. And the report here is in table format, or has a table format applied to it. How do you know? Well, when you click, you can see it selects one cell. It selects the entire column here. Not only that, but you see that tag in the upper left-hand corner. When you click on that tag, it selects all the cells within the table. So if you have a table format applied to the data fields and also their corresponding labels, you can do some additional things, as we learned in an earlier training video. You can come up here, click on the Arrange tab, go to the table group, and add some grid lines. Click on the drop-down arrow. If I choose both, it'll add grid lines around all the cells, including the labels. Because I selected every cell within the table by clicking on that tag. Click on it. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like. Right-click and go to the Report view. It looks good, except for the top here. Adding a border around the labels doesn't look that great. So what I'm going to do is right-click, go back to the Layout view, and to go ahead and change it just for the top row, the labels, I want to go ahead and select every label in that row. Go ahead and select the first one, hold down the Shift key, click on the second, Shift click the third, and so on. Or a quicker way to select the entire row is to go ahead and select the first label in this case. Hover over the far left-hand side until your pointer turns into a black arrow pointing to the right. Then click on it and it selects the entire row. Once we have it selected, go up here to the Arrange tab, to the Table group, click on Grid Lines, say None. In fact, while we're up there, let's go ahead and change the font color for the labels, and maybe also the background. Come up here, click on the Format tab, and in the font group, there's the font color. Click on the drop-down arrow. Now when it comes to colors and you're trying to tell your friend or email them what color to use, either a theme color or a standard color, well, especially themes, when you find one and you hover over it, that's the name of the color. This one's 10, background 2, darker 10%. That way when they come in here, they can hover over it until they find that 10, background 2, darker 10. In any case, I'm going to come down here and select yellow, which looks good for the font. Also, they have a background color. Come up here, just to the right of the font color, hover over it, background color, click on the drop-down arrow, and let's do purple. Let's go ahead and take it for a test drive and see what it looks like. Right-click, go to the Report view, and okay, we've got the color yellow. We remove the border around it, but why does it look like that there's a border still around it? Well, that's because, as you recall in the Design view, I don't know if you paid attention to this, but I went through it pretty quick. Right-click, go to the Design view. You see the page header section here? It's got the purple as the back color. In fact, if you look in the report header, it has a back color too. All I did is I select the labels down here like I would up here, select it, and give it a color, but that doesn't change the back color. If you want to change the back color, then go ahead and double-click on the page header bar to bring up the property sheet for that page header selection. On the Format tab, there's the back color, and it's a lighter shade of purple. I could go ahead and delete it and say that there's none, but then if I do that, it looks like it turns it to black, and I don't want that, so let's do something white. Click on the drop-down arrow, and let's see, we got our different colors, or better yet, click on the Build button there. That way you don't have to go through all the different coding for the colors, but go ahead and select something maybe automatic. Let's go ahead and see, right-click, go to the Report view. Yeah, because you can see that we have the top shade, and then we've got white around it, and then we've got the alternating colors with the rows. So I could be fine with that, or go ahead and select a different back color for it. In any case, you get the idea, the difference between the background color and the back color when it comes to our table, and the color of the page header section. Speaking of which, if you want to be able to format and make the change to the alternating colors for each row, let me go ahead and right-click and go to the Layout view and close out of the property sheet. You can come over here to the far left-hand side, just outside of that vertical line there. When you click in it, it automatically selects all the fields, the data fields within the table down below. Then I can come up here, click on the Format tab, go to the background color, and there it is, Alternate Row Color. Click on the drop down arrow and then choose something that doesn't pop out too dark. Maybe something, I don't know, maybe that's a little bit too light. Go ahead and select it. Changed it from a light green to an aqua color there. So we can go ahead and take a break and right click and go to the report view to see what we've done so far. So there's the alternating color there. Also, how about the alignment here? I've got the customer ID and it's aligned to the left. How about if I go ahead and take the customer ID and line it down the center? Well, let's go ahead and right click. We can go to Layout or the Design view. Either one will work. Let's come up on the Format tab here, and in the font group we have the alignment option, or you can bring up the property sheet. Let's go to the Design tab, Tools group, click on Property Sheet, and there's the text align. Either way, go ahead and click in it, click on the drop down arrow, let's do center. There we go, centered everything here within the column. And by the way, when it comes to selecting a column, you can go ahead and click on any cell here, and you can see it selects the entire column here, but more specifically, if you want a specific selection, it's focused here. But like I said, when I select one cell anywhere here, I can change the alignment for the entire column there, because the alignment is going to be applied to the entire column. What you do in one cell affects all the others. And again, Format tab, left or center. Let me go ahead and close out of the property sheet. Okay, a few other features. For example, if I go ahead and I'm in Layout View, if I select one of the fields here in this column, and let me go ahead and hover over the right hand sides till I can see arrows pointing in opposite directions. If I click and drag that in, and I want it just exactly that size, but you can see it's being cut off. As you recall, in an earlier training video, we applied the Can Grow feature to a field. So that means that if there's more text than what fits into the size, the width of this data field, it'll wrap it, and it will grow it that way vertically. So to apply it, go ahead and click on the Design tab, bring up the Property Sheet. Then over here on the Format tab, go ahead and scroll down just a little bit till we can see Can Grow. Double click that to yes. You can see how it's growing vertically now to fit all the text so it doesn't get cut off here. Let's go ahead and do some more formatting. How about conditional formatting? Now I know we covered this, but let's go ahead and do it in the report here. Let's select the field for the customer ID, the data field, and let's go ahead and apply some conditional formatting that says, okay, the customers that are between these two customer IDs, let's say 31365 and maybe 32411, go ahead and format that, because maybe that's the range that I want to be able to have highlighted a certain color that flags me, that says, okay, these are the customers that we had a marketing campaign with, and that we did very well with that campaign. So to get started, after I go ahead and select it in the Layout view, or you can do it in the Design view, just go ahead and right click, go to the Design view for the customer ID, just select it there. Come up here, click on the Format tab, go to the Conditional Formatting group, click on Conditional Formatting, click on that we want to create a new rule, and by default it says the field value is between, and then go ahead and if you had two dates, type in the two dates. Let me see if I can remember those fields. I think it was, well, it could just be a value, something close. Let's type in, and then between the other end. And then once it meets that condition, what should the formatting be? Hence, conditional formatting. Let's go ahead and select the color to fill in that cell. And let's do something, well, that will pop out, but not too brash. There we go. Purple again. Click OK, click OK. Let's go ahead and right click and go to the report view. And then when I click in the cells here, once it finds it's in between those two ranges there, it highlights it and shows it purple. Now the problem I have with that is that when I print this off, if I right click and go to the print preview, it's not going to show that, is it? So if I right click and go back to the Design view and then bring up the conditional formatting again, format to control formatting, conditional formatting, there's my rule. Go ahead and select it, edit it, and let's do underline and make it bold. Something that's not dependent upon the color there that will actually underline the text. And let's see if that will print. Click OK, click OK. Right click, go to the report view, shows it there. Right click, go to the print preview, shows it there. Hey, great. So I can apply conditional formatting, it's just that it can't be the coloring of a cell. If I want to print that conditional formatting out, that is. And you can see the range here meets that condition, so it's bold and underlined, and then of course if we go to the report view, when you click in it, also gives it the color. Next I want to be able to find out how many records I have here. To do that I can go ahead and add a totals row to count up all the records. So I can say these are how many customers or clients that we have. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and right click, go to the layout view, then come up here on the design tab to the grouping and totals, click on the totals drop down arrow, and let's go ahead and count the values. Click on it and it adds the total down below for how many records we have up above, and it says a total of 14. Let's go ahead and add a label. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and right click, go to the design view, and there's the total box right here for the records. Now to add a label to the left hand side of it, come up here on the design tab in the controls group, click on label, come down here, click there, and type in record count, hit enter when I'm done. Then I can hover over the border, click and drag that and put it right about there. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. Right click, let's go to the print preview, because what you see there is what's going to be coming out of your printer. Let's go ahead and scroll down. See, the text box is cut off, that's why I can't see the lower part of the 4 it looks like, or the 1. Right click, go to the design view, or I could go to the layout view. But since I'm here in the design view, click and drag and stretch that down. Go ahead and select the text box. Hover over the bottom middle handle till you see your pointer turn into arrows pointing up and down, and then go ahead and click and stretch that, and then we can right click and we should be able to see it in the print preview much better. And then finally, let me go ahead and go back to our layout view here, and I want to go ahead and do some data bars, and I don't think we have any fields here that's going to do it justice. Well, for example, let me go ahead and open up, double click on the book project report, and there's some values there, dollars. Let me go ahead and right click, go to the layout view, and I want to show you how you can add data bars to these fields. So it's just basically colored little bars that go out so big when you're comparing them to all the others. For example, go ahead and let's select one of the data fields, in which case it selects the entire column. Or you can go to the design view and just select the production cost text box field. Then come up here, click on the Format tab, come to the Control Formatting group, click on Conditional Formatting, click on New Rule, and we want to compare to other records. And so depending upon the smallest value, it'll have a preview, as you can see here, of a lesser bar, and then if it had a larger value compared to all the others, it would have almost the entire cell filled in. So let's go ahead and choose a different color. Let's do something that looks alright. And we go ahead and click OK, click Okie dokie, and there we go. Now does it print off? Well, right click, go to Print Preview, click on it to zoom out, and there we go. As you recall, a couple of training videos ago, we learned how to group our records, and that was done by taking a field that was duplicating the data. For example, like the book title, because these clients, they all purchased the same title, and for every client, it had that same book title listed. Instead, I said go ahead and list it once, and then take all these clients that purchased that same title and group them under that one title, and not have that title again listed and duplicating for each client. So once you know how to group these records together, and if not, you want to watch that training video, because here I want to show you how you can keep your groups together when it comes to printing your reports. What do I mean by that? Let me show you. Go ahead and right click, go to Print Preview, because in Print Preview what you see here is what you get when it comes to printing your report. You come down here to the navigation bar, delete one, go to page 2, type it in, hit enter, and that's what I'm looking for. At the bottom of page 2 you see where it says Ghost Hunting for Beginners. That's the title. Where's the rest of the records underneath that title? The clients who purchased that book. Well, it's on the next page at the top of it. So if I go to page 3, scroll to the top, there they are. So you can imagine that when you print this off and you hand it to your coworkers and they have to flip back and forth between the bottom of page 2 and the top of page 3 to go, okay, what was the title? Okay, now who are the clients? Let me go back to the title because I forgot. I mean, it's a mess. So instead, I can go ahead and say, okay, if you're tempted to split it, don't. Just put everything at the top of the next page. So it would take that title and any other records that was, well, being split and keep the whole group together and list it at the beginning or at the top of the next page. So to apply that feature and to turn it on, I'm going to go ahead and right click, go to the design view. Now as a side note, you see my details section, all these text boxes here, and I got a little bit of a gap or a space just above that. Well, every time there's a new record, I'm going to have a space in between each record. So you can imagine if you add up all that space between hundreds or thousands of records, you're going to have some extra pages there. So to eliminate those extra pages due to all that space, let me go ahead and close the gap. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and select all the text boxes, and I can do that a couple of ways. I can either click and shift click to select each text box, or better yet, come over here since they're all lined up together in a row-like fashion, and when I hover over the vertical ruler, you see my pointer how it turns into an arrow pointing to the right. Click on it once. It shoots a line, it cuts it across, and anything that it crosses through when I let go is going to be selected. Then you can go ahead and hover over the border and click and drag to move it up. And let me go ahead and undo that. If clicking and dragging doesn't work for you, once it's selected, you can use the arrow keys on the keyboard and navigate up. But when you use the arrow keys, it jumps. But if you hold down the control key and use the arrow keys, the combination of control and using the arrow keys, it will move it more minutely. It won't jump as much. So in any case, once you get it snug up to the detail bar, then I want to come down here and click and drag the book title footer by hovering over the top of it till I see arrows pointing up and down. Then I can click and drag it and just snug it so there's no space in between each record. Okay, now to go ahead and keep our groups together when it comes to printing this report. All you have to do is come up here on the Design tab to the Grouping and Totals group. Just like we did before in the training video when it came to creating a group, just go ahead and click on that same button to bring up that window down below. And as you recall, in that training video, we grouped it by book title. Well, just to the right of it, they have the More button, or it's an arrow when you click on it. It expands that and it reveals more details or more features when it comes to grouping by the book title. The least of which, the one that we want to cover, is right here where it says do not keep grouped together on one page. So it's splitting. So if it gets to the bottom of the page and it goes, well, I can't keep them all together, so I'll just go ahead and add the rest at the top of the next page. Don't do that. We can go ahead and click on the drop down arrow and we get two other choices. The one that I'm focusing on is keeping the whole group together. So even though it leaves a little bit of space at the bottom of one page, that's okay because I want everything kept together at the top of the next page. Now you can imagine if your group contains like hundreds or thousands of records, I mean, come on, how many can fit onto one page? It's going to be split anyways. But if the groups are a relative size where it can fit all in one page, then there you go. Keep them together all in one page. The other option was to keep the header and the first record on one page and then go ahead and split the rest if it needs to be split. Now, why would you want to do that? Keep the header and the first record together? Well, in Microsoft Word, you want to watch my training video on that. They have what's called widow and orphan. So when you have a couple of pages, and you get to the bottom of the first page, and you have, like we just went over, the book title there, and then everybody else, the group, the rest of the group at the top of the next page, well, who's alone at the bottom of that page? It's going to be the widow, separated from the rest of her family, as opposed to the orphan, where if we got to the bottom of the page and it had all the records, but one little record that belonged to that group couldn't squeeze within the bottom of that page, so it got cut off to the top of the next page, that's called an orphan. In any case, we're getting kind of techy and geeky here, but when it comes to breaking that widow or orphan, you have to have more than just one record together, and that's what it's doing here. Well, not necessarily two records, but it's got at least the header and the first record. So whenever you have two together, then it's not known as a widow or an orphan, and that's what it's trying to do here. Let's keep the whole group together on one page, and let's take it for a test drive. Let me go ahead and right-click. Remember, the print preview, whatever we see here is exactly what's going to come out of our printer here. So let's go to page 2, come down here in the navigation bar, type in 2, hit enter, go to the bottom, and you see that extra space there? Remember we told Access that, hey, we want to keep the group together, so I think it was ghost hunting or something. Let me go to the page 3, the top of it. There we go, ghost hunting for beginners. If you want to be able to print these off to where each group has its own page, you know, this group at the top of page 1, that group at the top of page 2, and so on, well, first of all, why would you want to do that? Because you could say that's a lot of wasted white space down below when each group gets its own page. Well, think of it this way. If you have a meeting and you want to be able to keep notes on each group down below, then go ahead and have them print off on their own pages here. So to do that, I want to be able to apply the Force New Page feature, and the definition of that is that it forces pages to break before or after a selected section. What's a section? Well, these are. You have the book title, which is grouping the records down below, and the book title header is a section, and the records down below it that it's grouped under, that's grouped to that title here, is the details section. As you recall, when you right-click and go to the design view, there we go. When you click on the bar, I just now selected that section, the book title header section, and there's the details section. Now I want to apply this Force New Page feature to the book title header section because I want to force it to break before this section here. So that way, every time there's a change in the book title, that book title and the corresponding records related to that title, or you know, those customers who purchased that book, will have their own page and be at the top of each page. So to do this, all you have to do is go ahead and double click on the bar there, and it selects, well, that section. And you can see the selection type is, and it says right there, section. And the name of the section is Group Header 0. I mean, if that doesn't work for you, then you can go to the Alt tab, go to the name, change that, and say, well, it's my book title header section. In any case, you know how to do that. Let's go ahead and on the Alt tab, come down here where it says Force New Page, click in it, and then when you click on the drop down arrow, we can do it before section. Select it, and then let's go ahead and test it. Right click it, go to the print preview. Again, we go here because what you see in the print preview is what you're going to get when you print your report off. Looks like on page 1, and it looks like it's breaking before each section because here's the first section or group of records here under the book title heading, Pizza Combinations. Let's go to page 2. It's got its own page. It's breaking. So the change in the next book title or the section, that gets its own page. Go to the next one and so on. Let me go ahead and right click and go back to the design view because you also had, let me click on the drop down arrow, after section. Now if I do it after the section, it means that the book title will be at the top of page 1, and then the details, because it's going to be breaking after this section here, the rest of the group will be split and be on page 2. For example, let's go ahead and right click, go to print preview. There's the book title, go to page 2 at the top. There's all the corresponding details that are tied or grouped under that one book title. In any case, let me go ahead and right click, go back to the design view, and if you have any questions about whether you want to select before section, after section, or before and after, which I haven't found any practical use yet for that, at least in my experience here, but go ahead and click in that field, hit the F1 key on the keyboard, and there you go. Go ahead and maximize it. Gives you the proper use for the following settings: before section, after, before and after, and then some examples of the Force New Page property settings. In any case, you can read about that then. What you're looking at here is my sale and profits report. It's somewhat detailed. For example, I've got my book title and all the clients who purchased that title grouped under that one title, and then of course the quantity sold for each client for that title, the total sold, and then what we have in stock and on order. And between these two, it would make up my total inventory. So if I want to go ahead and add a summary field that adds up these two fields, let me show you. Go ahead and right click in a blank area, go to the design view, and then there we go. We're in the book title footer section. That's where I want to add my total inventory. To add up the in stock and on order, put it to the right of it so it's close. So to add my calculating field, I need to add a text box by coming up here to the Design tab to the Controls group and then click on the text box, Control, bring it down here. I'm going to go ahead and click. When I click, it adds the label over here and then its corresponding unbound text box. It's unbound because it's not tied to any data field where it's pulling in data. So to do that, I need to bring up the property sheet for this unbound text box. Double click on the border. When I double click really fast, it brings up the property sheet for that text box. I'm on the Alt tab and it's got, well, it's a generic name. I can go ahead and delete that and say it's TB for text box, and it's the total inventory, however you want to spell it, whatever makes sense to you. And then down below in the controls source is where I go ahead and add my formula. Now because that cell's pretty small, I want to go ahead and zoom in on it so I can see everything when I'm done typing and not having part of it cut off here. So I'll hold down the Shift key and hit the F2 key, and it zooms in so I've got more space where I can see what I'm doing. Type in equals, and then I'm going to go ahead and add my first field here. The name of the field is in stock, and then close the square brackets so that defines the field, and then go ahead and type in plus, and then the next field in square brackets. Close square brackets. And then when I'm done, I'll go ahead and hit enter again, because upon exit of that field, Access goes back and checks my work, and if there's a problem it gives me an error. Let me go ahead and close out of the property sheet. Next I want to go ahead and change the label. So I'll click on the label to select it, click on it again to get my cursor flashing in it, and then delete everything to the left of the colon, because this is going to be my total inventory. Hit enter when I'm done. And then I want to align the total inventory label and its text box, let's say, at the same level as the on order, the label and its corresponding text box, just to the left of it. So I can hover over the border of either the label or its text box, and then until I see a four-way arrow, which means you can move this in any four directions, click and drag it, will go down. And if I can't quite seem to just get it aligned right, as you recall in an earlier training video, we can have Access help us out to align this. In other words, I would like to align these two fields at the top with these other two. So I need to go ahead and shift click all of these fields, then come up here on the Arrange tab to the Sizing and Ordering group, click on the Align drop down button, and when I choose top, what Access does is it looks down below and says, okay, which one of these fields is the one that's above the other? And it's these two fields, they're level, so it says, okay, we're above those two. We'll go ahead and bring those and align them to the top of us two right here, okay? So when I click top, it aligns it to the top of those. It looks good. Click off in a blank area, And then I want to be able to bring this text box actually closer to its label. So hover over the upper left-hand corner, click and drag it. Try to keep it a little bit straight. Click off, looks good. Now the other thing is that I'm looking at the color, and I would like it to be the same color, the same formatting. So what I can do is one of two things. I can either go ahead and select this and find out what the color is on this, and then go ahead and apply it to that. So to do it, go ahead and double click on the border to bring up its corresponding property sheet. On the Alt tab to the for color, that's the code. It looks like a web coloring code. In any case, you can go ahead and copy that and then come over here, select that, and paste it in its for color. Or, let me close out, you can use the Format Painter. Come up here on the Format tab, and there's the Painter. What it does is that first you select the format that you want to copy. Now when it copies the format, it's not just copying the color here, it's copying any other formats that are being applied to it, so you want to be careful. But because it's a label and I don't think it has really any other formats that are going to bother me, I'm going to go ahead and click on the paintbrush. As soon as I click on it, it copied the format of the label that I have selected. So all I have to do is come over here and click on this label to apply that formatting. We want to apply that formatting again from the label. Now if I do it to the text box, I select this one, I apply its formatting over onto this text box. Again, I'm not sure what the formatting would do. It may screw things up. I mean, the only way to find out is to select it, click on the Format Painter, come down here and click on the text box, and it bumped the label out, and that's annoying. So I think I'm just safe if I stick with the label, select it, click on the paintbrush, and apply that formatting over to the text box, okay? And we'll see what it looks like when we go to the report view to see if we like that formatting. It should be okay. Let's go ahead and right click and go to print preview, because what you see here is what you're going to get. So there's, okay, on order, total inventory, and then it has, wow, it's way out there. So it looks like it's aligning it to the right, the text. So maybe I to the left to bring it closer here. You know, make some formatting changes here, right click. Well, before I do that, let me click in, well, I'm in report view, so when I click in it zooms in, when I click on it again it zooms out. But maybe I want to be able to put a line here that separates this section from that section, or this group from that group. So let me right click, go to the design view, and like I said, when I select this field here, I think, let me go to the Format tab. You see it's aligning the text to the right of the box all the way over to the right. That's why it's so far away. If I want it closer, then we can go ahead and align it to the left hand side. So like I said, you want to be careful because it copied not only the color format but also the alignment format, well, I mean from the label. I'm not sure what other formats are applied to the text box here. That's why I quickly undid it and applied the format from the label, because it didn't seem to be that screwed up or would cause such a difference when I applied it to my text box here. Okay, let's go ahead and add a line down below in the book footer section. So after we're done with this section, when it goes to the next section, you know, the next book title, we got it separated by that line. So to do that, come up here on the Design tab, go to the Controls group, click on the More button. There's the line, click on it. Then come down here, click. It adds a line, but I want to drag it. And if I drag it this way, it's no longer a line, it's a box, or, well, okay. It actually, when you let go, becomes a very thick line. I don't want the line that thick. So I want it so thin, well, you can't even see it, but when I let go, then you can see it, okay? Once I go ahead and I click and drag it, if I need to move it, then go ahead and I use my arrow keys, or you can hover over the border and click and drag it, but with the arrow keys, be able to see where I'm going and be able to do it more minutely, especially if I hold down the Control key and use the arrow keys up and down. And let's go ahead and bring up the properties for the line. If you can't select the line, like you click off, you're like, oops, I need to select it to go ahead and change the properties. You can't quite seem to click on it, or maybe, let me click off, you moved it too far below that you can't see it. Then bring up the property sheet, come up here, of course on the Design tab to the Tools group, click on Property Sheet. Then click on the drop down arrow, and we're looking for a line. There it is, line 145. I mean, I don't know what 145 is, but I do know that it says line in it. Once we have it selected, then I can go ahead and change the border style. Click in it from transparent, click on the drop down arrow, and let's do dashes. Why not? And then how about the color? Right now when you click on it, it says no color, but you click on the build button, you can select any color you want. If you want it to be the same color as these text boxes down below, or it's got that kind of burgundy color to it, go ahead and select one of them. Of course it updates the property sheet here, and I'm looking for the for color. Copy the for color, click and drag to select it, or just write it down, #7, but it's easier to go ahead and select it and do Control C to copy. Then go back and select your line if you can select it. Otherwise, click on the drop down arrow here and choose your line 145. And then come back here for the border color, select it, Control V as in Victor to paste it, hit enter, updates it. Let's go ahead and right click, go to the report view, and hey, that's pretty nifty. And of course you can drag your line out a bit further if you don't like it so short and you want it just aligned up with the field here. Then as you scroll down, separating each one of them, each section. Like I said, you can right click and go back to the design view, select your line and hit the left arrow key to move it over so it's aligned up to the customer name. And then if you need to stretch it, drag it out. Let me go ahead and close here. You can hover over the far end and then click and drag. And then of course you got to be careful because that line can get really thick, right, if you stretch it, but keep it kind of thin. There you go. And if you're having a hard time with the mouse by clicking and dragging and you just want to go ahead and stretch it and not make the mistake of not getting it just thin enough, and go ahead and hit undo, then go ahead and double click to bring up the property sheet for it, and then just come over here on the Alt tab and change the width and say I want it to be 6 inches. That way you don't have to worry about clicking and dragging it to stretch it open to get just the right width. And then also the height. Right now it's 0. I mean, if you click and drag it and you stretch it up to a 1/2 inch, then come back here and say you want it to be 0, so it just looks like a line there. What you're looking at here, I've got 2 reports, my sales and profits report and also my inventory report, and I'd like to add that or append that to the end of my other report here. So whenever you're inserting one report into another, you're adding a sub-report, and since I'm inserting the inventory into this report, it's going to be the sub-report to this report. Now typically whenever you insert a report into another, it's added to the end of that report, so it's going to be at the end of this report. So to go ahead and add one report into another, a sub-report, go ahead and right click in a blank area, go to the design view, and there it is, the report footer. That's where I want to add it because that's the end of the report. As opposed to the report header, you got the sales and profits title printed on the first page, and then you have, however many pages. It's only on the first page at the heading of the report, and this is at the end of the report footer. So to go ahead and insert that report, inventory, at the end of this report, come up here on the Design tab to the Controls group, click on the More button, and there it is right there, Subform Subreport. Now if I was in a form, we would be inserting it as a subform. Well, not that other report, but inserting one form into another. But since I'm working with reports, you see that slash, it's now dealing with sub-reports. Go ahead and click on it, come down here, and let me go ahead and scroll down just a bit. I got some extra space, and I'll click right there. So the first question it asks is, okay, what would you like to use for your sub-form or sub-report? Well, again, we're dealing with reports, so I want to go ahead and use an existing report, and it's going to be inventory. Select it, click Next. Now you'll notice here in the next question it says, would you like to define which fields link your main form to this subform? Well, we're in reports, so you know what? It doesn't matter here. If I scroll down to the bottom, I can choose none and just click Next, and that's it. Well, except to go ahead and name this, we can call it our sub inventory. Click Finish, and kind of stretches the report out a bit width-wise, doesn't it? So if I need to rein it in, come over to the right-hand side, just over to the right-hand side of the grid, till your pointer turns into arrows pointing in opposite directions. Then click and drag the grid out just a bit so I can see the edge of my box for this sub-report. Hover over the middle handle till your pointer turns into arrows pointing in opposite directions. Then click and drag that in. Because boy, if I have this out too far, it's going to be breaking on other pages, cutting it off. And no, we want to make sure that the page width is about an 8.5 here. And then come over here, hover over the grid again to click and drag and pull it in. I think that ought to be okay, but let's take a look at it. Let me go ahead and right click and go to the report view, and then we want to go to the end of the report, or click and drag this all the way down to the bottom, and there we go. Or better yet, let's go to the print preview, because what you see there is what's going to come out of your printer. I mean, it pretty much looks the same here. I don't think there's going to be any different, but nonetheless, that's what the print preview's for. Come down here in the navigation bar, click on the last page, and it's on the last page. If I go to the previous page, before that, it's not cutting it off, but it actually puts that sub report on inventory on the last page. Nice thing about that is if I have 2 separate reports and I have a meeting and I always need to print these off together, well, go ahead and do it once and then pull it in. That way you don't have to open them up and print them off separately. Now if you want to go ahead and create some mailing labels, in other words, I've got my customer info report here. I've got the customer name, the address, city. All I have to do is go ahead and generate a report, a label report, based upon the fields within this report, which, by the way, when I scroll over, I've got the address, city, but I don't have the state. Well, that's okay, because this report is based upon the customer table, and when I double-click and open up the customer table, it has that state field. So actually, when it comes to generating my labels based upon this report, even though it's not available here, the state field, it'll still pull in because it's based upon that table. So let me go ahead and close out. Make sure I have the report selected that I want to go ahead and generate my labels based upon the fields within that report, which is pulling its fields from this table based upon that table. Let's go ahead and click Create. Go to the Reports group, click on Labels. The wizard opens up. It's going to ask us a bunch of questions. We give it answers. Based upon those answers, it's going to give us, well, hopefully a nice looking page of labels here. First of all, I look at the manufacturer. Who manufactured them? Is it Avery? Click on the drop down arrow and choose one of the manufacturers, because when you do, you can come up here and look on that box and see the product number and easily identify the label, as opposed to looking at the dimensions going, let me see, this label is about 1 1/2 by 2 1/2. In any case, you get the product number. You can easily select it without guessing the dimensions there, trying to figure it out with a tape measure. In this case, I've got 3 across, and then I think it'll have 10 labels down or more. In any case, click Next, and then it says, okay, how do you want your text to appear on this label? You can change the font type from Arial to Courier, the font weight, font size, color if you have a color printer, italics. Ooh, that looks fancy. Go ahead and uncheck that, click Next. What would you like on your mailing label? What fields? I want my customer name, so I'll go ahead and double click. Then I'll hit Enter to go to the next line so I can enter in the address, double click, or add the address field to it. Hit Enter, and then double click the city, and then I'll come over here, type in comma, space, and then double click the state. Like I said, even though the state wasn't displayed in the customer info report, this report's still based upon the customer table, which has that field in the table, so it still pulls. That's fine. And then come over here, hit the space bar, as you can see it, and then double click on the zip. Click Next, and then it says, do you want your fields sorted? In other words, when you generate your labels, would you like all the A's, customers that begin with the A's up at the top, the first labels, then down to the B's, C's, all the way down to the Z's? Go ahead and double click customer name. That's how I want my labels sorted. Click Next, and then, well, let's go ahead and give it a name for our report and call it RPT for report, customer, click at the end, labels, click Finish, and there you go. Now, what I recommend before you go ahead and stick the labels in your printer and print this off is that you print this off on a blank sheet of paper. Take that paper and hold it in front or behind your labels, and then hold those two that are overlaid, one on top of the other, in front of a light. And then when you look at that, notice that when the light comes through, make sure that the labels are around and aligned with the text that you want to be printed, well, within the center of each label. Because if not, and it's cutting it off, like, okay, we get the first label right, then the next label comes here, and then the next label cuts that off. Well, a couple of things you can do. You can either right-click and go to the design view, and then try to close the gap, because all this grid space here is actually adding that much space between each label, at least mostly vertically, a little bit horizontally, so you can hover over, down at the bottom, the page footer bar, till you can see your pointer pointing in opposite directions, then click and drag up to close the gap, and then you may want to click and drag to the right to bring in the grid just tight. In fact, you see the space just even before that. Let's go ahead and shift click all these fields here. In fact, if you hold down the Control key and hit the A key, Control A, selects all the fields, then you can go ahead and use your arrow keys to arrow them over to the left, and then go ahead and click and drag that over. Of course, I still have space above that. Well, you get the idea. Let me go ahead and right click, go to the print preview, and you see how they're tighter together now? Now the next issue that I'm looking at is that look at the border, and also look at the spacing in between the columns. I mean, if that doesn't look right, then we can come up here on the Print Preview tab, when we're in Print Preview, of course, and then go to the Page Layout, click on Page Setup. I can work with my margins and say, okay, the left margin's got to be about 1 inch. And you can see when I type it over in the preview, it's going to push everything over. And then on the columns page, you can see the column spacing is 0.1. I can go ahead and go 0.001, see if that does anything. And then go ahead and click OK, and close the gap with the columns, and it pushed everything over, so you get the idea. Play with that, and then when you're done and it looks good, then go ahead and stick in your sheet of labels and print off, and you're good to go. Back in Access Level 1, we talked about the similarities between the Excel program and the Access program. I mean, in short, Excel, you can create a database, but in Access, you can do so much more with your data than Excel ever could when it comes to organizing it. So if you find yourself wanting to import some of the data from Excel into your Access database, or somebody sends you an Excel file and says, okay, here's some data here that I exported from my database into Excel, now you can go ahead and import it into yours. I'm going to show you how you can do that. So I've got my database here. Let me go ahead and minimize that down to the taskbar. open up my exercises folder so I can show you that I have my computer inventory workbook. In other words, miniature database in Excel. Let me double click to open it up, and there we go. Miniature database in the Excel program. And it's important that it's organized correctly, because if not, then, well, it's going to be hard to import this into Access. And what I mean by that is that, for example, up at the top we have the column labels, column headings for each column, and the corresponding data down below. So for like the last name, we've got everybody's last name, first name, and asset tag, and all the numbers. So if it's organized like that, with the column labels up at the top and the corresponding data down below, then Access should have an easy time to import this and create a new table based upon the data within this worksheet. And then down below I have an additional worksheet. It says extra worksheet. I created that because that way I can go ahead and show you when it comes to importing data from your workbook, if you have a lot of worksheets, how you can go ahead and select the correct worksheet and just import the data on that worksheet and not all the other worksheets. So to get started, let me go ahead and close out of the workbook, close out of the folder, come back down here to the taskbar, click on the corresponding button to restore my Access program and the database, and to import that workbook or that worksheet within that workbook into my database here. I'm going to come up here, click on the External Data tab, go to the Import and Link group, and there it is, Excel, because it's an Excel workbook that I want to import. More specifically, a spreadsheet within that workbook. Click on it, it opens up, it says, okay, where's this file? Go ahead and click Browse. I'm going to go over in the navigation pane, click on the desktop, because on my desktop I have my exercises folder over here in the main view. Double click to open it up, and there's the computer's workbook. So double click on that. Now the address is pointing to it. So down below I just have to answer one more question. How and where do you want to store the data in the current database based upon this workbook? Do you want to import the data into a new table? Do you want to append it to an existing table? And if you're appending it, well, Access can add the records from this workbook to it, but then again you want to make sure that you got the same field name so it can tie one field to the other. Or you can just go ahead and link it to the source, meaning that the data actually isn't stored within the database here, it's just pointing to it. So to keep it simple, let's just go ahead and import it and create a new table based upon that worksheet. Click OK. Opens it up, it says, okay, you got a couple of worksheets here. Is it this worksheet or is it that one? Go ahead and select it and look down in the preview window, and it's not that one. So we're back to inventory. That looks right. Click Next. As you recall, in the worksheet I had the column labels or headings up at the top and the corresponding data for each label down below. Access was able to easily identify those column headings because it was in the first row. First row contained those column labels or headings, so it automatically checked this, because if it wasn't checked, it would take those headings and mix them up with the rest of the data down below, which wouldn't work. And so we don't want that name mixed up with the numbers down below. It's supposed to be the label for that column, so we want to check that so it moves it, bumps it back up, separate from the data down below. Okay, click Next. Then it lists all the fields, and if you want to make any changes or specify how you want to import each field, then go ahead and click on the column heading for that entire column or column label, selects it, and then it says, okay, the field name, are you okay with that? No. Let's go ahead and add an S. It adds the S. In other words, you can rename the fields to something that makes sense to you when you import it into the table. I'm going to go ahead and backspace that. Then the data type, click on the drop down arrow. Let's see, we're using numbers. We can use double or integer, smaller numbers, as opposed to long integer, maybe in the billions or trillions. Let's go ahead and select integer. And then the indexed, are duplicates okay? Well, of course we're going to have duplicates because the department, you can have many employees belonging to the same department. And then do we want to go ahead and import this field or not? If I check it, it doesn't delete it. It just remembers it. So when I click Finish, it just imports all the other fields and not that one. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that. So go ahead and select each column, and then the default here is the data type text. On the asset tag, manufacturer, make the changes up there. Let me click Next. And as you recall in level 1, if we want to go ahead and retrieve data more quickly and efficiently, Access recommends that we define a primary key field for our new table. And by default, Access adds a primary key field. It added it over here, called it ID. It is assigned the data type, the auto number, so it automatically is generating a number sequentially, beginning with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's never going to have a duplicate number. So that could be a unique identifier for all these records. But if you already have a field that's uniquely identifying the records, like the asset tag, you can go ahead and, well, can't select it until I say choose my own primary key. Then click on the drop down arrow and choose asset tag, and then it'll assign the primary key to that. Or you can say no primary key, then when you're finished, if you change your mind, you can always go to the design view of the table and add it there. So what you do in the wizard, if you forget to do it and it's not what you want, for the most part you can go to the design view and make those updates or those changes, okay? For the most part you can go into the design view and make those updates or changes that you need to. I'll go ahead and let Access add a primary key field here. Then we'll go ahead and click Next, and then we just need to give it a name. And it's going to be a table, so TBL, and I can't name it inventory because that's inventory for the books. This is inventory for the computers, so we'll probably just do computer inventory. And then go ahead and click Finish, and then it says OK. Do you want to go ahead and save these import steps? Why would you want to do that? Well, if somebody keeps going into that file that I have in my exercises folder and updates it, makes some changes, adds some more computers, or deletes some, then it's easier for me to go ahead and save these steps and then go ahead and run it really fast, where it says saved imports. You see it right there. When I save it, it goes to that folder there. So I can go ahead and run that real quick without having to go through all these steps again, okay? So I'll go ahead and check that. And then what do you want to save it as when it comes to saving it in that folder there? Import table computers, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and click Save Import, and there we go. Computer inventory, double click, and ooh, that's fancy. So it's got the auto number field that it added. That's the unique primary key field. And then the department code, department name, and like I said, if I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to do this because the asset tag, the barcode, is a unique field for each computer, then of course you can right click, go to the design view and assign that, delete this field here, and that's okay too. Okay, how many records do I have? We've got a total of 24, so if I go ahead, make any changes or updates or add a new record, remember I save this as my saved import here, so let me close out of here, okay, and minimize this down to the taskbar, double click, open up the exercises folder, come here in the computers workbook, and I want to go ahead and test this to see what happens if I add a new record or make any changes. With that saved import, we'll actually update my table. So let me go ahead and come in here and add a new record. Okay, when I'm done, I'm going to be sure to save my work, close out, come back down here to click on the button to restore the Access program, and then remember I saved this as an import, so I had a total of 24 records before I do this, and now after I should have 25. But come up here on the External Data tab to the Import and Link group, click on Saved Imports. There it was, it remembered it. Go ahead and it's already selected, you can just click Run. It says, do you want to overwrite the existing table? Say yes. All objects were imported successfully. Click Okie dokie, close out. Let's open it up. Do I have 25 records? Yes, there it is, Barney Baloney. For those of you who need to import another file type like a CSV file, well, for those of you who don't know what that is, let me go over it briefly. Let me go ahead and click on the Exercises button so it can bring that folder or that window to the front here. And there's the sample file that I want to import. It's my booksales.csv. And anything that comes after the dot is the extension. If you don't see them on your computer, well, you can go ahead and watch my Windows 7 training videos on extensions to learn more about it. But in any case, CSV stands for Comma Separated Value. It means that the data is all broken up by commas, so that way it doesn't mix all the data. And the reason why this little icon has a green X is because Excel can say, okay, I can go ahead and break up the data by looking at the commas. So there's one comma, whatever comes before it I'll put in the first cell, whatever comes after that comma I'll put in the second cell, then for the second comma, whatever comes after that I'll put in the third cell, and so on. So I could double click and open this up, and it will open up the Excel program doing just that. Okay, what became before the first comma was the order ID 1 for the first record. What came after that first comma went to the second cell, then the second comma after that, the third cell, and then so on. And if you see pound signs within a column in Excel, that just means that all the data can't be displayed because it's too long to fit in that tiny column. So just hover over the right side of that column until you can see black arrows pointing in opposite directions, then click and drag it, or double click really fast. Let me go ahead and close out of here and not save it. And to prove my point, if I open this file up in Notepad, it would show me all the commas. Like I said, Excel just says, look, in place of the commas, I'll put cells. So if I come down here, click on the Start button, go to Notepad, and then go File to Open, and then let's see, I'm in the Exercises folder, but it's not displaying it because it's looking for a text file. I want to show all files, and there it is, the book sales, Comma Separated Value. Double click on that, opens it up, and there we go. So there's the order ID, comma, and then, well, those are the column labels, but within that same column, separated by the first column, is the order ID. You see that? So we've got 1, comma, then the date, which is for the sales date, comma, then the part number, and so on. So again, Excel looks at that and goes, hey, I can separate these. I can go ahead and put that in the first cell, that in the second cell, and then after that comma, between those two commas in the next cell, in any case. to prove my point there, comma separated value. So to import that, let me go ahead and close out of the folder. Come up here, click on the External Data tab, and this one's kind of a interesting import because you'd think, well, it had the Excel icon on there, I should just go ahead and click on Excel. No, just because Excel can read it doesn't mean that it's something that's part of Excel and that it would import or accept that through the Excel feature or option here. Instead, I'm going to go ahead and do it through the text file. And you can read that little pop-up says import data from or link to data in a delimited or fixed width text file. Delimited, talking about delimiters, are special characters like commas, semicolons, and that was the delimited file because I had the special characters separating the data by commas. So click on text file, it says okay, where's this at? Click on browse. It's on my desktop over in the main window. It's in my exercises folder on my desktop. Double click and there it is. Go ahead and select it, click open. It's pointing right to that file now, and then how and where do we want to store the data in the current database once we pull the data in from that comma separated value file. We'll just go ahead and import the data into a new table, click OK. Then up at the top it says your data seems to be in delimited format. In other words, a special character separating the fields here, and that character is commas. So we'll go ahead and say delimited, click next. And then it says, okay, choose the delimiter that separates your fields. Well, by default, it selected the comma, but if it was something else, then go ahead and choose space or semicolon tab, or type in the character if it's a dash or a hyphen. Now, as you recall in the previous training video, our first row contains column headers or field names for the data listed below each one, like the sales date, all the dates, the part number, all the part numbers. So we want to check this so we can actually separate that, the names, from the data down below so the names don't get mixed up, or the column labels with the data that it's trying to represent down below. So the first row contains field names. So we check that to separate it. Go ahead and click next. As you recall in the previous training video, you can go ahead and change the field name, the data type, if it's an integer, long integer, and you can see whether it's indexed or not and make changes there. And then if you don't want to import something, select it, check, don't import. I'm fine with this. Let's go ahead and click next. And then Access recommends that we define a field that contains a primary key. If we don't have one to choose, then we can just let Access do it for us, in which case it added an extra field over here called the ID field with the data type auto number, automatically generating a number, which is interesting because if you notice, the order ID looks unique. It looks like it's automatically just side by side, but the thing that I run into here is that if I go back and I go to order ID, it says yes, duplicate's okay. In other words, I can't come back over here and say, okay, let me go ahead and choose this to be the primary key. I mean, I could, but it's not automatically generating the number for me. So the problem I run into is that if I'm entering in the next number, which let's say is 15, I mean, I know it goes down further, but if it cut off here at 16, I go, what's the next order ID? Is it 17, 18? I'd rather have it automatically generate for me. And maybe this is a field that I just don't import. You see what I'm saying? So go ahead and use some critical thinking there, and then we'll let Access add a primary key field for us and click next. And then this is going to be your table for, and then we'll do lowercase TBL. Click Finish. And then of course if I want to save my import steps to the import folder there, go ahead and check it. And it's importing from the book sales CSV file, or you can add, cs.csv. Click Save. So it's always there when I click on it. There it is to import if anybody makes any changes to it. Without having me to run this import wizard all over again, I can just come here and select it and click Run. Okay, close out, and there it is, my products. Double click and it's all imported. Sometimes you may find yourself wanting to export data from either a table or a query into a program that somebody has like Word. So to do that, to export it from the query or table, just go ahead and select it. Let me do book sales. Come up here, click on the External Data tab, go to the Export group, click on the More button, and go down and export the selected objects. I've only selected one to Word, and it will do it in rich text. Let me click on that to show you. RTF, rich text file. Rich means that it can be formatted, as opposed to plain text, which doesn't contain any formatting. And by default, if you have Microsoft Word 2010, it'll open up RTF rich text format files. Let me show you. So it says, okay, specify the destination, file name, and format. So right now it wants to dump it into my Documents folder. No. Let's go ahead and click Browse, go to the desktop, and heck, why not just do it on the desktop? Click Save. And then is that the name that I want to give it? Book sales, that's fine. If not, I can go in here and delete TBL and just have book sales, and then leave the extension for rich text file, RTF. And then all we have to do is go ahead and click OK. And then do we want to save these export steps? That way, instead of going through all this again, we can just go to the, it's right there, I don't know if you can see it, Save Exports, click on that, and select what we saved it as. Well, if I check here, that's what it's going to be saved as, Export Book Sales. And it's going to be TBL, Book Sales. In any case, we'll say save it. That's it. Let's go ahead and minimize this down to the taskbar. There it is, RTF. It's got the Word icon there, meaning that Word recognizes the content within it. So if I double click to open it up, it'll open up the contents within Word. And there we go. There are my column labels, column headers, and their corresponding data down below. That way I can go ahead and, well, it's quite a bit, email this off to whoever needs it or put it on the network. And then as you recall, let me come down here and click on the Access button to restore the program here. That I save this as an export. So that way if I come in here in the book sales table and I make some changes, and the book sold for, well, the customer here was not 100, it was 101. So let's try to remember customer ID 32560, and then click below it to save it. Go ahead and close out of here. We saved it as an export, so now I need to export this with the new changes to my desktop. Again, external data to the export group, click on Saved Exports. There it is. Go ahead and click Run. It's going to overwrite the file with everything here, including those changes, and go ahead and say yes, we want to replace that. It says it did it successfully. Click Okie dokie and close out and minimize down there. Double click, open up, and there we go, 32560. Instead of 100, it's now updated and shows 101. If you need to export a CSV file, a couple of training videos ago we learned how to import a CSV file, Comma Separated Value File. We're going to use the same concept when it comes to exporting one of these objects, converting it into a CSV file, because there's no button that says, hey, this will convert it to a CSV file, so we have to use the backdoor approach. We have to pretend like we're going to convert it to a TXT file and then change the extension at the last second. For example, you can take any one of these objects here, select it. Let me double click and open up the report. Now, when it comes to exporting your data into a CSV file, I recommend that you do it based upon a table or a query, not a report that's based upon a query or a table, because it's not going to look as clean and you have to do a little work to clean it up. For example, let's go ahead and do this first so I can show it to you. Let's export the contents within this report into a CSV file. Close out, make sure it's selected, come up here, click on the External Data tab, go to the Export group, and then click on the Text File button, because again, there's no CSV file button that we can use to export it to. But from here, we can go ahead and convert it, which we'll do in just a second. First of all, where do I want to go ahead and dump this file? By default, it's going to, well, my default is going to dump it to the desktop. If I don't like it, click on the Browse button, choose another folder, okay? I'm going to click Cancel. And then we have the name of the file right here. It's, well, not the /, but after that, RPT Customer Info. If I don't like that, which is based upon the report that I'm exporting, then go ahead and change it. In any case, there's the extension. If we type over it, CSV, it'll convert it to a CSV file, okay? When I'm done, go ahead and click OK. Then it says choose the encoding to use for saving this file. If you don't know which coding to use, then you can go ahead and use the default Windows, click OK. And then do I want to save these export steps so I don't have to go through all those steps again? Just go ahead and come up here and run it once, and there we go. No. I'll do that in just a second, but not for this export here. Let me go ahead and minimize this down to the taskbar, and there it is. Select it. You can see the extension .csv file, our customer info report. Double click to open it up, and look how clean that is. Isn't that neat? How we have the customer ID kind of going in and out winkily there, if that's such a word. What happened is that it took all the fields, and if I select the cell for all the column labels and dumped it in that cell. How do you know? It looks like it's, across the Excel worksheet here, but when you click in the cell, if you look up in the formula bar, it's all crammed into that same cell. It just has a delimiter gap. And as you recall, delimiters are characters that separate one field from the next, which could include a bunch of spaces or even a tab. There's no commas here, so it looks like a tab. So you got the customer name, and in the same cell, not in a separate cell, in a separate column, has the customer ID, then has it separated by a tab or a space or several spaces, the address, and so on. So you have the customer names here, then you have the customer ID in that same cell, but because there's nothing next to it, it's expanding across the width of the spreadsheet here. In any case, like I said, I recommend that you don't use reports to export your data into a CSV file. But if you do get something like this, there is a workaround. In other words, you can go ahead and select all of these cells that contain all those fields within those cells there. Come up here to the Data tab, go to the Data Tools group, and click on Text to Columns. I've got a training video in Excel 2010 that you want to watch that will easily break these up and have the customer name and all the customers in one column, and then the customer ID and all the following or corresponding IDs in another column. In any case, messy. Let me close out, click on the button down below to restore my Access program, juxtapose that to a query or a table here, select it, come up here, external data to the export group, click text file. By default, again, it's going to be to my desktop. Let's go ahead and convert that to a CSV file. And then I'm not going to check export data with formatting and layout. That gets messy. I'm going to leave it as is. Click OK, and then it opens up a window, which I didn't get that when I was exporting the data in the report. And you can see here it's allowing me to go ahead and choose the delimiter, such as a comma, that will separate these fields, and the comma's there because that's how it's going to export. So I can click Next, and it says, okay, choose the delimiter. The comma's already added, so you can see the comma's there. I'll choose comma. If there was another character, choose it, and then go ahead and type in that other character. And then you've got the include field names on first row. Remember the column label headers? We want to go ahead and include those, so part number for all the part numbers, book title, the column label for all the book titles, and so on. Okay, click Next. And then that's it. It's going to export it to my desktop. If I don't like that, well, then I can go ahead and type in the name of another folder. Well, I better do it after my desktop and then a /, or just remember the address where it's going and then go to that folder or wherever it's at and then go ahead and pull it out. I'll click Finish. I can go ahead and save it, and then there's the name of it, and click Save. That way, if I made some changes here and I need to re-export that to the same place with the same file name, in other words, to overwrite it with the updates that I made here, then click on Save Exports, go ahead and select it, click Run. It'll say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and overwrite what you just exported with all the updates that you made. Do you want to do that? You can say yes. I'll say no. Close out. Minimize that down to the taskbar. There it is. Select it. CSV file for the table. Double click to open it up. Oh man, that's pretty. You see how organized that is? With those delimiters, the commas, was able to separate the fields and put them in their own corresponding columns here. For the part number, the part numbers down below. For the column label, book title, the corresponding titles for each book. Oh, that's just nice. And then again, when you see pound symbols there, it just means that the contents within that column can't be seen without expanding the columns. So we can hover over to the right of the column header that we want to expand until we can see our pointer turn into arrows pointing in opposite directions, then click and drag or double click really fast, and there you go. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.